Please can I welcome everyone to this meeting of the Council in the Council Chamber at Castle Hill, Winchester. Welcome especially to members of the public who have submitted questions for the Council. The first item of business this evening are the minutes of the previous meetings of the Council. Members, the minutes of the ordinary meeting of the Council held on the 18th of September 2024 are set out on pages 7 and 11 of your agendas pack. Are these agreed as a correct record? Right. The next agenda item is disclosure of interests. Are there any disclosures of interest to be made regarding the business before us this evening?
Duration of item number 5, which relates to appointment of myself as monitoring officer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm a county councillor as well as city councillor. It's a non-prejudicial interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make the same declaration of personal but non-prejudicial interest as a member of Hampshire County Council, but there's item 7A on the agenda relates a motion to Hampshire County Council, so I will leave the room during that motion and then come back afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make the same declaration, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will also be making the same declaration of personal non-prejudicial interest as a member of Hampshire County Council.
Sorry. Thank you. The next agenda item is announcements. Members, my mayoral year continues to be very busy, especially as we head towards the festive period. Next week, on Saturday the 9th, is the annual Winchester Roundtable Fireworks and Bonfire Night. And then the following day, I will be joining members of the Remembrance Sunday service at Winchester Cathedral. And on Monday the 11th, there's also going to be a 2-minute silence at 11 a.m. outside the Guildhall. And I'll be joined by members and officers and the Royal British Legion on the Guildhall steps, and it would be wonderful if councillors could also be there. And we can make a contribution and remember the sacrifices done by servicemen and women in the conflicts in the last century. Right, my other events in November include Winchester Park Run's 500th event celebration on Saturday the 16th of November, and I will not be actually running. On Friday the 29th, there is a wine tasting evening at Abbey House in aid of my charities. And I have roped in a very excellent local wine merchant from Alresford, runs a place called the Naked Grape, very knowledgeable about wine, a master of wine, and he will be bringing a selection of wines of different sorts and talking about them. And it's great entertainment, and it would be lovely if you could be there. Right. And finally, I'll be attending the annual Winchester Cathedral Carol service on Wednesday, the 18th of December, when I will be reading a lesson. And then on Saturday, the 21st of December, I will be at the Winchester Cathedral Christmas Market at a charity stall for the Mayor's Charities, selling exciting bits and pieces. Right, Mr. Macebearer, thank you very much. Now, Leader, do you have any announcements?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple of announcements to make. The first is that I recently received a letter sent to all council leaders from the Deputy Prime Minister outlining what the budget may mean for social and affordable housing and the council more widely. Not all of its contents are directly relevant, but the following areas are, I think, of particular interest to colleagues. The first is a one-year cash injection of £500 million to the existing Affordable Homes programme. There will be a consultation on a new rent formula for social housing of CPI plus 1% for 5 years. The government has an intention to reduce right-to-buy discounts and to ensure that councils can keep all receipts from right-to-buy. The budget also confirmed that we will receive extended producer responsibility fees for packaging in 25-26, although they haven't yet said who will get how much. And another potentially helpful area of extra support will become clearer when they confirm what proportion of the 233 million in additional resource funding for homelessness, out of the total of 1 billion in 25-26, will be available to us as we face the increased pressure from increasing temporary accommodation. It is not all good news, though, and one area of potential challenge that we will need to be mindful of going into the future is the following statement. We will reform the approach to funding allocations within the local government finance settlement by redistributing funding to ensure that it reflects an up-to-date assessment of need and local resources. This will start with a deprivation-based approach in 25-26, with additional funding targeted to the places that need it most. Broader redistribution of funding will follow through a multi-year settlement from 26-27. So longer term, this is unlikely to favour our district and highlights the critical importance of our TC25 programme. We will find out more in the local government finance policy statement, which is due later this month. Where relevant, these issues are also touched on in the medium-term financial strategy paper, which is going to scrutiny next week. And I will circulate whatever I can as we get further details sent to us. The second main area of announcements relate to devolution. At the last full council, I reported on the expression of interest submitted to the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Governments by Hampshire, Portsmouth, Southampton and the Isle of Wight. And the main activity in this area still consists of waiting for the government to set out their thinking in an English devolution white paper. I met with district, county and unitary colleagues yesterday, and Hampshire and the unitaries are working to see if they can identify a common ask as part of any devolution arrangement. We've asked that this be shared as soon as possible with districts. But generally, we are all waiting to see what the government propose and looking to see what it takes to be ready to respond when their proposed framework becomes clearer. I was also at the Local Government Association conference in Harrogate, and there was a lot of talk about devolution and almost no mention at all of local government reorganisation. However, I think we were all slightly surprised to see in the budget the following statement. The upcoming English devolution white paper will set out in more detail on the government's devolution plans, including on working with councils to move to simpler structures that make sense for their local areas, with efficiency savings from council reorganisation helping to meet the needs of local people. So, delicately phrased, and I think we would all say that it is very important for local people that there is an adequately local level of representation. Certainly any discussions that we have in the Hampshire area raise important questions to do with scale. A Hampshire unitary would be very large. A Hampshire Solent unitary would, in effect, be a regional government and not a local one. But to provide adequate breadth of services, we also know that a single district is too small. So there may be some difficult choices ahead, but I will involve members as I know more, and I think it will be important that all of us talk about how we best serve our residents, but also make sure that we have a system of government that is adequately responsive to local needs and responsive to local voters going forward as the proposals become clearer. Whatever our scepticism about LGR, which is the new acronym I have learned, which stands for Local Government Reorganisation, I suspect it's not the last we've heard of it, we will not be able to bury our heads in the sand once the proposals come forward, and we will need to properly think them through. But in all of this, we need to make sure that the needs of the communities we represent, the rural communities, our market towns, our city, and the people who live in them, and the institutions we have here remain properly represented, and that there is adequate local government in this area, as there has been, as we know, for well over 800 years. And if we look at the true history going back of the earliest identified local representative for over 1,000 years. Did the Anglo-Saxons get it wrong? We will no doubt be forced to find out fairly soon. So thank you very much indeed, colleagues.
Chief Executive, do you have any announcements?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As members are aware, the traffic is a little challenging this evening, so we have a couple of members who are unavoidably delayed, but will be joining us as soon as they can. Other than that, Mr. Mayor, we have apologies for this evening's meetings from Councillor Miller and, members, Councillor Vivian Atchwell. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Executive. The next item on the agenda is item 4, questions from members of the public. I would like to welcome again members of the public who are here this evening and who have submitted questions for Council to answer. I understand that we have received one question for this evening's meeting, and a reminder to please read out the submitted question as set out in the order paper that has been published on the Council's website. Can I now please call upon Patrick Davies? Welcome. And could you address the meeting using the microphone? A reminder that following the response given by the Cabinet member, you may also ask a supplementary question which must arise directly out of the question or the reply. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The question is brief. Why has the station approach update process continued without any reference to the Council decision in its Local Plan Regulation 19 document to move the city centre bus station to the railway station?
Thank you. Can I call on the leader, please, Councillor Todd, to answer that?
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Davis, for your question. And I'd like to start with an apology. It's undoubtedly the case that some sections of the Reg 19 draft local plan could confuse people who don't spend their lives immersed in planning policy and want to know the Council's policy on buses and a bus station. In particular, there is a report of a Winchester design workshop consultation event on page 85 of the document, section 5.55, supposedly or outlining, quote, opportunities in the Broadway area that outlines one of these opportunities as to move the bus station to the rail station area and develop the bus station site with city centre uses. This seems quite black and white, but it is not a statement of council policy. And indeed, the necessary evaluation that might need to be done for such a change to be a fixed policy has not taken place. It's a report of what was said by some people at a workshop in November 2021. It's not reflected in Strategic Policy D2 that immediately follows on page 92, which makes clear that any policy transport improvements should be those, quote, identified in the Winchester Movement Strategy, Winchester Walking Strategy, and City of Winchester Local Cycling and Walking Infrastructure Plan, and other relevant transport documents that have been prepared and consulted on with the involved local community. And that point about consultation is a very important one. It's also not in Central Winchester Regeneration Policy W7, which still requires the Central Winchester redevelopment to provide for buses and coaches, or in Policy W8, which outlines policies priorities for station approach. I would also say it's not a practical policy until we have succeeded in even more reductions in city centre traffic and the resulting congestion. This is not a change we could make and still be able to have a coherent and reliable bus system. It is not an idea that Hampshire County Council currently supports, or that the bus companies support, or that this council supports. So the reason why the station approach area doesn't reference such a decision, although it does look at how we can improve bus provision in the station area, is because we have not made such a decision. And the station approach work will be continuing accordingly.
Thank you, Councillor Todd. Do you have a supplementary question, please?
Yes, please, Mr. Mayor. Bearing in mind what Councillor Todd has just said, could he explain then why also in the documents that now form part of the Regulation 19 package running to hundreds of pages, on page 88, where it talks about the station area, it says the main opportunities in the station area of opportunity are, little b, move the bus station from Broadway and co-locate with the rail station to create a transport interchange. Doesn't this whole exercise prove how ill thought out the council's rush to produce its Regulation 19 documentation has failed the people of this district? Because it is now very difficult to see how people can respond intelligently to this station approach Cabinet Committee regeneration paper, which was considered on the 15th of last month, and is now going to lead to further confusion because people are being given no opportunity to express a view on these whole issues about where buses should or shouldn't be in the town. Shouldn't this have been thought through carefully in the first place and not led to confusion on the current consultation, which is presumably costing a very large sum of money? Can the leader tell us how much money is being spent on this current connecting place exercise for the station approach? And isn't it in danger of becoming an abortive and very expensive waste of money?
Thank you. Councillor Todd, please, if you would like to respond.
Absolutely, thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, I make absolutely no apology at all for wanting to put forward a positive vision of what it is we're trying to achieve in the station area. And also, and on a separate basis, no apology at all for wanting us to have a coherent, citywide, properly thought through approach to buses that has been adequately consulted on and takes the needs of the city as a whole when we look at how bus routes and bus infrastructure need to be organised. And I think this point is about the city as a whole. We need to be looking at bus priority measures, as I touched on in the City of Winchester movement strategy, and we need to be looking at the routes and the frequencies and the other opportunities we have in order to provide a better service. We're confident that the allowance that has been made in the station area is consistent with any of the options that we might look at going forward. And the reason, and I've recognised that this section, which if one is used to reading, understanding and interpreting planning policy, isn't confusing, but taken on face value can indeed cause confusion. But I would stress that it's clear in the document that this is not the transport strategy for the city. It is highlighted as opportunities identified in a workshop, and it does not have the status of planning policy of the kind that would lead us to be required to be looking at a new bus station co-located with the railway station, because for many reasons that taken in isolation of a system for the city as a whole is not something that's practical or sensible or would make sense for ensuring that we have a system that encourages as many people as possible and enables as many people as possible to use bus services both in the city and wider afield. And let's not forget that ultimately, buses, the thing that makes a bus successful is where it goes, not where it parks. And what really matters is how people can interchange and making sure that we have a dramatically better route system, which I think we would all like to see, particularly in rural areas, better routes, better frequencies, more carefully thought through approaches that reflect the changing needs of the city and our wider area, rather than getting caught up in a consultation exercise that does not form the council's policy, either in the local plan or for station approach, or in terms of the movement strategy.
Thank you, Councillor Todd, and to Patrick Davies for your question. Please can I remind you that your question and the answer will be published in the minutes of this meeting in due course and on the council website. Now, you're very welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, and if you wish, please, an officer will take you up to the public gallery. Thank you. The next item of business this evening is agenda item 5, which is the appointment of a monitoring officer. Chief Executive, would you please introduce?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Agenda item 5 is the appointment of a monitoring officer. Report CL 172 refers, and this is set out on your agenda on pages 13 to 14. Members, to confirm, the recommendation is for the Council and it is set out on the agenda and in the report, and it is that Gareth John, Director of Legal, is appointed Monitoring Officer for the Council with immediate effect. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mrs. Taylor. Is there a proposer for the recommendation, please?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to propose the recommendation.
Do we have a seconder?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I so second.
Right. Thank you. Right. Is the recommendation as set out on the agenda and in the report approved? Could I see... could I see a show of hands, please?
Mr. Mayor.
Right. Sorry.
Mr. Mayor, may I make a comment on this before you go to the vote? I'd like to thank Mrs. Kirkman for all of the efforts that she's made on our behalf, filling in as the monitoring officer when we were between leads in the legal area. I think she's looked after us very well, and I think this council should offer our thanks to her for the efforts that she's made. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Horrell. Right. Right. I think we can agree that the recommendation is agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And if I may suggest, the minute could perhaps reference that the best thanks of the Council be awarded to Mrs. Kirkman for her interim monitoring officer duties. Thank you, Councillor Horrell, for raising that.
Members, the next item of business this evening is agenda item 6, consideration and determination of the recommended minute of Audit and Governance Committee held on the 26th of September 2024. Mr. John, if you could please introduce.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Agenda item 6 is the recommended minute of the Audit and Governance Committee held on the 26th of September 2024, and this is set out on your agenda in the draft minute of Audit and Governance Committee on page 15. Report AG 140 refers, and this is also included in your agenda pack on pages 17 to 38. Mr. Mayor, please note that the Council are firstly recommended to note the report, adopt the Local Government Association Model Code of Conduct, and also require all councillors to attend training. The monitoring officer is also to advise parish and town councillors of the council's adoption of the new code. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. John. Please can I have a proposer for the recommended minute of the Audit and Governance Committee?
Mr. Mayor, I would like to propose the recommended minute, please.
Thank you, Councillor Morris. Do I have a seconder?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to second the recommended minute.
Right, thank you, Mr. Chamberlain. Can I call on Councillor Morris to introduce, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and fellow councillors. Following a meeting of the Cross-Party Constitutional Working Group, the proposed Code of Conduct, AG 140, was brought before the Audit and Governance Committee. At that committee, we examined the proposal and recommended it for adoption, along with the additional recommendations that all councillors will be given training on the new code and that the monitoring officer will advise all parish and town councils. There are two main reasons for adopting this new Code of Conduct. It's been drawn up by the Local Government Association and as such is in the process of being adopted by other councils up and down the land on the basis that it is best practice. So for us to not adopt it would be incongruous, to say the least. The working group considered adapting it as a sort of Winchester version, but concluded that there was nothing that needed changing in it, so the most straightforward thing to do would be to adopt it unamended in full. Secondly, when you were reading through the new Code of Conduct, you will have found that while in broad terms there's nothing in there that you haven't already agreed to in the current Code of Conduct, the terms and language of the code have been made much clearer and more accessible. It's now written in the personal tense, and items have been reordered and accorded more emphasis. For example, treating people with respect. In the current Code of Conduct, that is covered in item 4.1, sections I and J. In the new Code of Conduct, it's the first thing you come to. It's item 1.1 and 1.2. This reordering of items should make it easier for councillors to refer to the code and abide by it. In addition, some areas have been tidied up to be more user-friendly. For example, where the existing Code of Conduct gives 10 different examples of forms of bullying, the new code works on the basis that, as a councillor, I do not bully any person, as a clear guiding principle, and any councillors wishing for more detail on what constitutes bullying will then refer to the supporting guidance on the LJ website, where there's a 700-word definition. As a result, it should be understood that everything that is currently a rule or responsibility for councillors in the existing Code of Conduct will continue to be a rule of responsibility in the new code. It's not in any way less stringent or more lenient. Indeed, the only significant difference with the existing Code of Conduct is in addition in the interests category. All the rules regarding registrable interests are the same, but there's addition of a new category for the disclosure of non-registrable interests, which you'll find in Appendix B, Section 7. This provides guidance on what to do at a meeting if a matter arises which affects your own financial interest or well-being, or that of a relative or close associate. And you'll be excited to know the test to determine whether you should then remain in the meeting is in Appendix B, Sections 8 and 9. I draw your attention to this not out of a love of appendixes and of subsections, but because this is more or less the only thing which is new, and so it should be brought to councillors' attention. This will be covered extensively by our new monitoring officer during the Code of Conduct training, which we provided on the 14th of November. So to summarise, this is effectively a boilerplate Code of Conduct, and the LGA's model that provides a robust framework designed to promote accountability, transparency, and integrity in public office. And as we are all in favour of these things, I recommend that members note the report, adopt the LGA Association Model Code of Conduct, and attend the training. Thank you very much.
Are there any questions? Councillor Horrell, Gareth, could I ask you to answer any questions, please?
Thank
you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a point of clarification. When we began on the process of revising the Constitution, the Code of Conduct was a piece that was missing, so I welcome the opportunity to endorse that this evening. But one of the actions that we agreed was not only would we inform the parish councils, but we would try and encourage parish councils where there were differences to try and adopt a similar code so that we were all working to the same framework within our district. That wasn't clear to me in the report that we were actually going to do that, and I'd welcome the opportunity for clarification. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. Yes, I intend to engage with parish councils on this and potentially offer a training package for those that wish to implement this. So, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? Right. Well, shall we move on to debate then? Councillor Godfrey, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm delighted to be able to support this recommendation, having been involved in the Constitution Working Group and the Audit and Governance Committee, which both overwhelmingly supported the adoption of a model code of conduct. Because it's going to be consistent across all our parishes if we can persuade others to adopt it as well, which will reduce the workload and the training commitment so that we have a simple set of rules that we can all understand and apply. But it's common across other local authorities, in many of whom have adopted this same model code of conduct already. It's been tested by those other authorities without, I understand, any significant problems. And it will be supported by clear guidance on how we're going to adopt and apply the principles within the Code of Conduct. And for my mind, it is also benefits from being familiar. It is based on the concept of reasonable behaviour as assessed by members of the public. And I think that's very important because people then have confidence that they understand the principle. But if you can't tell members of the public what you're doing, then you're probably going against the Code of Conduct. It's not right. This Code of Conduct is simple and we should adopt it this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Godfrey. Councillor Becker, please.
Thank you. Well, Councillor Godfrey has very succinctly summarised everything I wanted to say, so it just leaves it to me to thank the members of the Constitution Working Group for both their work on the Constitution and, as Councillor Horrell has said, this does bring that group to a close. So thank you all very much for your participation, your input, and I do hope you vote in favour of this evening. Thank you.
Councillor Lee, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to endorse what's just been said. And I'm mindful of the peer review, which talked about a one district approach. I think the consistency in behaviour this will deliver and develop, I think, is very important. So I heartily endorse the Code of Conduct. Thank you.
Councillor Lee. Right, there doesn't seem to be any more debate. I quite forgot to ask the seconder, Councillor Chamberlain, if you wish to reserve his right to reply.
Nothing further to add, Mr. Mayor, so no, thank you.
Right, Councillor Morris, do you wish to sum up, please?
Only in summing up, I want to thank the fellow contributions by Councillor Horrell, Councillor Godfrey and Councillor Lee and Councillor Becker, and I think we've made a strong case between us. Thank you very much.
Right, is the recommended minute of the Audit and Governance Committee as set out on the agenda and in the recommended minute agreed? Can I see it? Right, thank you very much. Any votes against? Abstentions? I think we can agree that's carried. The recommended minute of the Audit and Governance Committee is agreed. The next item of business this evening is... Oh.
Mr. Mayor, I do apologise for breaking into your sentences, but I'm just going to declare an interest in the next item because it relates to schools and use of smartphones, and I'm a governor of a school. It's a non-prejudicial interest, I do believe, but it's one of the schools who signed the agreement about not having smartphones in schools. So I just thought I ought to register that here. There may well be other members here who are also school governors to whom this affects.
Councillor Lerney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It hadn't occurred to me earlier, but yes, as the school governor, I have a similar declaration to make.
Right, Councillor Latham.
Yes, the same for me. I have the same declaration. I hadn't thought of it earlier. Sorry.
Right.
Much the same,
right.
Mr. Mayor.
And Councillor Wallace.
Sorry, I missed out on my opportunity to make my normal declaration as a county councillor at the start, so I'm just...
Oh, right, OK. Thank you for that. Thank you for
you.
correcting that. Right. Councillor Horrell, please, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too am a school governor and stand alongside my colleagues who are as well. Thank you.
Right, thank you for that. It might be easier to put up all the people who aren't school governors. Right, the next item of business this evening is agenda item 7, which is a notices of motion. Now we have two motions this evening. The agenda sets out the evening's motion, the first of which is to be moved by Councillor Tippett-Cooper. Councillor Tippett-Cooper, do you have a seconder for your motion?
I do, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Becker.
I'll be seconding the motion and reserve my right to speak.
Right. Thank you. Right. Councillor Tippett-Cooper, would you like to present your motion, please? And you have a maximum of 8 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And it's a credit to all members that so many of you are involved in schools. I'm sure this motion will evoke some debate and probably provoke a lot of knowledge and shared experiences that members have had of this issue. So today, I bring before you a motion that addresses a pressing issue facing our schools, and it's causing increasing alarm and concern amongst parents, the dangers and problems associated with smartphone use in schools. Now, this motion calls on us to urge Hampshire County Council to adopt guidance for smartphone-free schools across our county, and also for us to engage with the fantastic smartphone-free campaign, smartphone-free school campaign, as part of our activities. Now, Councillor Becker and I, who bring this motion tonight, are both parents of young children, and along with many of other parents in our district, we are increasingly alarmed and concerned by the growing body of evidence indicating that unrestricted use of smartphones in schools can negatively affect academic performance. It can have serious adverse impacts on mental health on young people too. Now, the research on this issue is really only starting to emerge, and recent research from 2023 is confirming parents' worst fears, that smartphone distractions impair focus while exacerbating anxiety and other mental health issues amongst young people, and exacerbating cyberbullying amongst them too. Now, some statistics in this area are not just alarming, but they're downright terrifying. And I've been sent a number of them, and I can only really share a handful. A Children's Commissioner report from 2022 finding that 75% of UK 15-year-olds questioned had been sent beheading videos. King's College London paper showing teenagers with problematic smartphone use being 3 times more likely to suffer from serious mental health issues. Other studies showing that students' focus drops by 20% when a smartphone is nearby, even if it's turned off. And even when it's on, the distraction worsens, and teachers in surveys reporting that nearly 50% of their students are distracted by their phones in every lesson. So I think imagine trying to focus on a maths problem or engage in a discussion in a classroom with a screen in your pocket buzzing every few minutes. And even as adults, we know how hard it is to focus when our phones are within reach, and I dare say we all here find it hard. And these little tools, as useful as they are designed and engineered to be addictive, to create little dopamine reactions in us that make it so hard to ignore them. Now, tech companies know this, but they are simply not doing enough about it, and our children's education and development is being jeopardized as a result. And so it is time that all local authorities sided with parents to do what we can to try and tackle this issue. So the issue, as I said, is not just academic. Mental health concerns amongst young people is growing and has been growing, particularly since the pandemic. And research is showing that teenagers who spend over 3 hours a day on their phones, their smartphones, are twice as likely to suffer from anxiety and depression. Smartphones are designed to be addictive, as I've said. And in fact, the rates of anxiety amongst teenagers has risen by nearly 50% in the last decade. And that's a troubling trend, and the belief is, and the research is starting to show, that's increasingly linked to smartphone use and social media use. Now, I do want to make something clear. This motion is not about being anti-technology or anti-smartphone per se in every setting. There is a space, an important space for parents to make judgments about what their children are given in terms of a device outside of school. No, this motion is about setting boundaries within the school setting, and not rejecting technology. It's about recognizing that during school hours, smartphones often become barriers to learning, become barriers to students having social connections with each other, and can create mental well-being problems. Now, briefly, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the incredible work of the Smartphone Free Classrooms campaign and their efforts to raise awareness of the negative impacts on smartphones as young people. It's been absolutely invaluable, and their support of this motion has been too. In supporting this motion, we are reinforcing their campaign, we're supporting their campaign, and we're aligning our efforts with their vision for healthier, more focused school environment. And this motion commits us as a district council to engage with that campaign to identify potential adjustments to our own activities that supports their campaign aims. And I've been immensely humbled by the passion and knowledge this group has shown in engaging with me on this issue. And I can only begin to touch on the sort of the detail and data and information they've been sending me. When I told them I only had 8 minutes to do the speech, they said, how long's the meeting? I said, well, it can be several hours. That's more the sort of time we need to really get across the full impact of this issue. Now, some may note that government guidelines in this area are already in place around the restriction of smartphones in schools. This was published in February this year, and this is a welcome first step, and I'm sure members on the other side of the House will have supported this, and it came from Gillian Keegan, I believe, the former Secretary of State, a very welcome first step. Now, this motion is simply asking that the County Council can go even further. The government guidance is broad, but Hampshire County Council can go beyond what's recommended by providing schools with specific actionable frameworks to ban smartphones in schools. Now, schools will need clear guidance on how to implement such bans, how to manage exceptions to them, how to enforce the policies consistently, what alternatives there are. There are schools that are, for example, allowing the use of dumb phones, which allow students to have a communication device, but it's not a smartphone. It is not a device that has access to the internet in the same way, and that can cause the same harms. So a lot of the challenges I get on this is, well, parents want to talk to their kids. They want to be able to communicate with their kids, know where they are. There are devices that allow parents to do this, but also avoid having to have a smartphone in their pocket all day. Teachers and staff also need the right support that the county council can give. And we can't expect teachers to enforce a phone-free environment without training. Hampshire County Council can look to provide this and equip them to manage resistance to such policies, communicate the benefits of a smartphone-free policy, and further, there can be support given to schools to provide funding for the necessary infrastructure to maintain this policy if that was to be the approach taken. Finally, there's an important need to monitor the effects of it. Already in certain schools that have tried this, St Swithin's is an example in Winchester, they've already seen real benefits in banning smartphones in their school. And so, members, I urge you to support this motion tonight. As I say, it's not about rejecting technology. It's about supporting parents. It's about supporting schools. It's about supporting teachers. It's about reclaiming schools as places for focus, connection, and growth. And by urging Hampshire County Council to take more concrete action than the government guidance alone, we can support the efforts of the Smartphone-Free Classrooms campaign and send a strong message to tech companies as well, that we care about our children's well-being and we're committed to create environments that prioritise their mental health and prioritise their education. Colleagues, members, I urge you and ask you to support this motion today.
Thank you, Councillor Tippett-Cooper. Could we now debate the motion, please?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I thank you for bringing this evening to the council. I don't entirely support it, but I don't entirely disagree with it. As a parent of 2 children who are now in senior school, the school manages the balance between having smartphones in school and the children really well. In classes, in fact, they are sometimes encouraged to bring out the smartphone to assist in learning, and they have various learning apps and they have various competitions that actually they use their smartphones really positively for. However, at other times, if the phones are seen, they are confiscated and not returned until the end of the day. And this can, then if this happens again, then there are more essential punishments for this. So the schools are very capable of managing this themselves. I wholly support Hampshire County Council having a team to support schools to manage this, to support with ideas, to support with punishments. But I think to try and do an outright ban would be unnecessary and actually detrimental to the uses that the schools have on the children's education. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brooke. Councillor White.
So I kind of agree with Councillor Brooke. As a former teacher in Hampshire schools, it is dealt with very well. There are quite tough restrictions already in schools. It's important that the head teachers decide within their own settings what's appropriate for their particular school. And as Councillor Brooks said, they are sometimes a useful learning tool. So perhaps there are other schools that I don't know about. I only know the schools that I've taught in or as a parent. Perhaps there are other schools in Hampshire that aren't doing the restrictions tough enough, and perhaps further guidance is needed. But these phones aren't going away. It's ever-changing technology, but we have to get used to it, and restricting them too much is not the answer. I think really what parents need is teaching children how to use the phones appropriately, teaching them about the dangers, and giving them guidance about a healthy use of a smartphone. And I know some schools are already doing that guidance as well, but I think that's something that could be improved.
Thank you, Councillor White. Councillor Lee, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you for this motion before Council today. I think it's very important. So whilst the motion commendably addresses the adverse effects of unrestricted smartphone use in schools, and acknowledges the proactive steps taken by the Smartphone Free Childhood campaign. I wonder if it overlooks the importance of integrating, as Councillor White has indicated, digital literacy education into curriculums. Equipping students with the skills to navigate the digital world responsibly is essential, as it empowers them to manage technology use effectively and understand its potential impact on their well-being and academic performance. Incorporating digital literacy programs can complement smartphone restrictions by fostering a balanced approach to technology and education. Additionally, the motion could benefit from a more comprehensive strategy that includes collaboration with local health and social services. Engaging these stakeholders can provide a holistic support system for students, addressing underlying issues such as mental health challenges exacerbated by smartphone use. By involving health professionals and social workers, schools can ensure that interventions are tailored to meet the diverse needs of students, promoting a healthier and more focused learning environment. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Councillor Horrell, please.
Mr. Mayor, sorry. Mr. Mayor, thank you for allowing me to speak, and thank you to Councillor Tippett-Cooper for raising this. And I accept there is some really fascinating and rather scary research about the impact of smartphones and studies in particular when they are taken from young people and they're given the space not to have them, how much they enjoy that opportunity. So it is certainly an area of learning. However, as a school governor, along with our head teacher, so with the leadership of the school, we actually took the decision to ban smartphones during school hours in our school. And it is within our remit as governors at this time to, along with the head teacher clearly, who is operationally in charge of the school, to make such a decision. And we did that in the light of what we all understood and how we wanted to manage the learning and the curriculum with our children. So I think at this point, Hampshire do allow that. It is absolutely in our powers, and those of us who are involved can hopefully make that influence with some of the educational institutions in the county. And also, the county do provide guidance about some of this already. So we have knowledge as leaderships in the various schools, both governors and the teaching staff, of how to approach this if we believe that is the right thing for our school. We've already heard this evening that maybe some schools take a slightly different approach, but there is flexibility, and some of us have exercised that to try and bring a more protective environment, a healthier environment, and a focus on well-being that we felt would result from that. So it is a difficult motion in the sense of the diktat, when actually some of us, you can already do this if you're involved in your school in a particular way. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Horrell. Councillor Latham, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As someone who professes to be a Liberal, I'm not particularly keen on banning things, but I think in this particular instance, there are a couple of reasons why a ban is actually a good thing to do. First of all, we're talking about children, and there are plenty of other things that society restricts people from doing until they reach a certain age. You know, if it's to harm their development or anything, and I think these, you know, the studies are showing that that is the case. And secondly, this is a collective action problem. And I know as a parent myself that once a few people get smartphones, you know, the temptation becomes too great, and the pressure is insurmountable for other parents or children to take them up. And when you have a collective action problem, one good way to fix it is with an external rule change, you know, so a ban in that effect is a good tool to combat that. And then finally, to how schools are currently managing them. I don't think if they're already using smartphones in schools in lessons, that can become a problem for those children who don't have it. It's a little bit unfair on children who don't have smartphones if the schools are assuming that that students will have them and are using them as a teaching aid. There should in fact be sort of technology in the school to help with their digital literacy. And secondly, as Councillor Tippett-Cooper pointed out in introducing the motion, there are alternatives for the communication side of this. The dumb phones, so-called dumb phones, can be used for what a lot of parents want their children to have phones for, which is that critical communication piece. So I think a ban in this instance is a good thing to be calling for, and I support the motion. Thank you.
Councillor Brophy, please.
Thank you, Mayor. As a father of a near teenager, I have a lot of sympathy on this issue myself. And I think Councillor Latham's point about collective challenges needing a collective response is the key to it. I think all too often, where there's no obvious law or rule in place, we look at social norms. Smartphones are a new invention. We don't have social norms. We can't look at what we grew up with or what our parents taught us. Often I'm finding myself asking my son what other parents do, and apparently all the other kids have no screen time limits and all are allowed to use Snapchat. So that was easy for me because my child is entirely trustworthy. So what I would say is that schools are the ideal place for setting those norms and helping us shape those norms collectively. And having a collective understanding of that has to take leadership at some points. Schools are also the right place to do this because they're increasingly building technology into every part of their curriculums. And therefore, it's a great place for them to help us all set a standard for society to adopt and also to teach kids healthier habits when they're actually using technology. One other point, my son's lucky enough to go to a very tech-forward school, and they are actually encouraging them to use iPads and also to use phones to log on to their school bus. They've actually forced the smartphone on us more quickly than we expected. Now, where schools are bringing technology in and asking children to use technology, I think it's incumbent on those schools to make sure that they're not pushing the problem into the home as well. And therefore, schools taking a responsible lead and following guidance like this campaign are actually quite a sensible approach to do. Final point on this is with teaching and enable tech and with the comments, the very sensible comments made about the fact that we do need to make kids, children more aware of technology and incorporate technology into teaching. I think that's very important, but the cost-effective way of bringing technology into workplaces and also schools, as my son's school's done, is bring your own technology. So when you're doing that, you're actually forcing, again, the smartphone into the child's household as well, into their personal life because of the school taking the lead. A final point on that, though, is that maybe while the motion is, I think, a sensible one for us to adopt, for Hampshire themselves to advise schools, they probably don't need to focus on just this kind of device because this is an iPad, it's exactly the same, and all our laptops are the same. Ultimately, it's the apps and the platforms that we need to kind of monitor, really. These are just gateways to the wider issue.
Thank you, Councillor Brophy. Councillor Bolton, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I've got 3 children that span 24 to 15 and have experienced the flow of social media and smartphones and that wave of it going through the family, starting with our eldest, of course. And viscerally, I feel the same as you, that it really is quite scary, the effects. And yet, I struggle with, a ban, as you say, because I do think technology has its place. I do think it's not necessarily in school where you get some of the literally evil stuff that they can access on their phones. It's at all times, all places. And it's very difficult to control that. What I do think I think a lot of schools and a lot of head teachers and a lot of governors do feel the same way that we do. And I think they have the tools to make good decisions about the use of technology. And we should allow them to do that and support them and give them what guidance and help they need to do that. But I don't feel comfortable with banning it, because I think that will be tricky to enforce. It could be problematic to enforce when we want technology to be used sensibly and educate our kids in how to use it in the safest possible way. I think what you say about some of the apps, they are the problem. That's where the dopamine rush kicks in. Some of them are designed to just make us all addicted to them. And personally, I try to avoid social media at all costs, because it's horrible stuff. And it gives a megaphone to some of the least socially acceptable people in the world. And that's not fun. So I feel your pain, and I've seen it on my kids' face when they have, all of a sudden, you cannot explain why they're in tears and they're very troubled by something that's happened on social media. And I'd love to be able to stop that, but I don't think I'm capable of that. But what we are capable of is better education and, helping them to use technology better.
Right, thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Porter.
Thank you. I have a friend who was involved when smartphones first started to arrive in colleges, and she solved the problem by putting a bucket of water in the corner of the room. And the moment she saw that phone out, she was just dangling it over and saying the next time it goes in, she never had a problem. But I watched my young grandson seek immediate gratification from parents' smartphones. They know every password, they know how to take a picture, and one's less than 3. And even the 1-year-old knows how to go like that across the front. So I think that these machines are much more powerful than children realise, and in many cases than parents realise. I think that they are essential but worrying for many children. And a serious concern is the link to mental health. And I think that it's important to think about, when children are growing up, that they think about 3 areas, which was advised to me by a YouTube video, actually, so it just shows that the social media does have a purpose. One was autonomy, a sense of agency about themselves. The second is competency, a sense of achievement for themselves. And one was relatedness, relating to family and their friends as they negotiate their way into adult life. And we know that it's not an easy job to move from childhood to adult life. And so I watched a young student wait for her friend only a couple of weeks ago. We were on a bus going home, and it was about school time. And she was actually waiting for her friend so that they could all sit together on the bus. And they sat at those ones at the front, the 3 when it comes in a line. And as they got into the bus, they all sat down, got their phones out, and all started to scroll on their phones, and didn't actually talk to each other at all. And the young lady who wanted to wait for the others looked wistfully around the room, or around the bus. And then I realised that the whole bus was totally silent. It's not like getting on a bus at 10 o'clock in the morning with a lot of 60-year-olds who the chatter is sometimes enormous. It was a totally silent school bus. Where's the relatedness in that? Where's the chance of just sharing your concerns or your chat with your friend? So for me, it made me realise at that point that there is a way of thinking about your smartphone having a purpose to find out the information you need, not knowing how powerful it is that you've got to look good on that phone, even if you're less than 3, for goodness sake, that picture's not good enough. And also that relatedness to other people, to have that sense of looking at that person and seeing if they really understand how you feel and how you can understand how they feel. And so I do support this motion today. The school I'm a governor of has done the same as Councillor Horrell's school and signed the same piece of paper and the same commitment. And I think it would be good if all schools had the opportunity to think about that, really seriously think about that, rather than just thinking that their school's got the answer. I think it's a really good way of trying to get some training, some consideration, to looking at best practice with other places so that they have the opportunity to make that decision for themselves. And parents who now think of it as the norm to have their phone in their hand all the time, we may just change the next generation's feeling about those smartphones. I've watched parents at school nativity plays watching the whole thing through their phone, not actually looking at the children. No wonder we have young people with mental health issues if all you're worrying about is, does it look good for that screen, not, does it look good for my mum?
Thank you, Councillor Porter. I think people have quite a lot to say on this topic, so I'm proposing to extend the time by 5 minutes. We now have Councillor Cremoyson.
They've obviously changed the rules on the system so that only one of us can have a light on at a time. Just a couple of things. Firstly, just as a way of context, my kids are between the age of 23 and 26, a little bit like Councillor Bolton's, where they're kind of mostly through this. Or they're through the age where you can actually apply any guidance on it, you know. It's more like them putting guidance on me some of the time. So I think there's one point I want to bring out, which is we've focused a lot on banning, whereas I think the motion is actually calling for the county council to develop and issue guidance, not necessarily to ban. So that's the first point. And I would suggest that if the county council was to take this up and to develop guidance, it is highly likely that they would consult with authoritative bodies like school governors and so on, and that might include people in this room who've, you know, clearly expressed that some schools are managing this very well. So that's the first point I'd like to say. The second point is about age. Now, I think, you know, and bearing in mind our schools are generally delineated somewhere around between year 11 and 12. That's where they typically switch. So I think there's a different set of guidance that would apply for primary schools, where you're looking up to year 6, and there would be for year 7 through to year 11. And I hope County Council may not be thinking about developing guidance for sixth form, where I think you've lost any battle there. So I think we need to think about what the framework would be for those different age groups. And myself, I would certainly consider banning the use of smartphones in primary schools. I have 3 children, one of whom I think was, you know, mental health was seriously damaged through what happened in year 5 and year 6, through not just through phones, but through the always-on communication, the always available to be, you know, to see stuff, to read stuff, to not have the opportunity just to zone out and just calm down from what you might have been exposed to in the playground or in other forms in the school. So I think we need to think about it in terms of age and having, you know, and in effect just say, okay, we trust our county council to consult with the right people to develop some guidance that takes into account best practices that they see from some schools that are doing it well, some communities that are managing it well, and perhaps try and apply that into other areas where it's perhaps not happening quite so well. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Right, I've Councillor Wallace, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I think like my colleagues, I'm not quite sure. I have a lot of sympathy for this motion. I understand where people are coming from. My children were going from primary to secondary. I think that's when it hits most. But Yeah, overall on this motion, I'm not quite sure what it's achieving. Winchester has no direct role in education. It's led by the government and by the county authorities. There's already government guidance in place. At the start of this year, the government issued guidance for schools on prohibiting the use of mobile phones throughout the school day. Then in May of this year, the House of Commons Education Committee, of which our MP was a part, our MP at that time, issued a report entitled Screen Time Impacts on Education and Wellbeing, which is not a lot of analysis of the use of phones at schools and the impact of it was presented. So a lot of this work's already been performed. Locally, every school already has a policy in place on smartphone use. Commonly, this is to keep smartphones out of sight during school time. However, in some cases, this can involve smartphone use in specific situations where it would benefit classroom activities. When national guidelines and local policies are already in place, I'm struggling to understand why this motion to implement more regulations and drive our already stretched schools and teachers to do more monitoring and reporting is needed. We can't turn back the clock. Smartphones are here, and they're used outside of school. The motion does not stop children from having smartphones. In fact, my child needs a smartphone to get on the bus to get to school. He wouldn't be able to get to school without it. So I have a lot of sympathy for the concerns that have been raised, but I don't think this motion is the way to achieve that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace. I think we have extensively debated this with different views from all parts of the floor. I would like to call on Councillor Becker if she wishes to exercise her right to speak.
I would, thank you. I've listened very carefully to what everyone has said. As everyone probably knows, I have two young children, aged 8 and 6, and they do not have a smartphone yet, but I do. My 8-year-old is already asking when he can have a phone because some of his friends have them. So this is an issue that is becoming an issue at an earlier and earlier age. As Councillor Wallace has said, in today's digital age, smartphones are ubiquitous. They infiltrate every aspect of our lives, including potentially getting on buses. They are extremely helpful tools. They give us access to information in a way that we never could have expected when we were children. But children's brains are malleable. They're developing. They are developing skills. They are developing knowledge. They are developing habits that will last a lifetime. A few years ago at Law Sunday, many of you may remember Baroness Florella Benjamin spoke to us, and her mantra was, childhood lasts a lifetime. And she's right, it is such a fleeting time, but the experiences we have during our school days when we are children, they shape who we are for the rest of our lives. And those negative impacts from smartphones will have an impact for the rest of our children's lives. Smartphone use in young people is fueling a mental health crisis. Councillor Tippett-Cooper set out some of the horribly sobering statistics. Since 2010, when smartphones started becoming common, rates of depression, anxiety and self-harm have dramatically spiked. That there must be a link between those two events. There is no other explanation for it. Lots of researchers have looked for one. It is smartphones. They expose children to harmful content that no child should ever be exposed to. 90% of girls and 50% of boys say they've been sent unwanted explicit content, yet the apps that they host on the phones are addictive by design. They are programmed to encourage more and more, longer and longer use. We all know that. We all find it hard to put our phones down, and we have grown up in a time when our brains weren't used to that. Imagine what it is like for an 8-year-old who continues to doom scroll through YouTube, through Instagram, through Snapchat. But the choice for parents is really hard, and we all know that. The peer pressure children are placed under is immense. They are put under pressure not only to get the phone, but to then participate in the social media, including during the school day, which puts pressure on people to make sure the makeup is right, the clothes are right, the image is right, all of that on children, our children. This motion calls on Hampshire County Council to take the option away from schools to allow smartphone. It reduces the pressure that parents are put under for the children to have smartphones. It also reduces inequality between different schools. It allows children to have the option not to have a smartphone and puts the impetus on the school and, dare I say, the County Council to make sure that tools for digital learning are available in the school, and it's not the parent's responsibility to provide that. Face-to-face interaction is essential for developing social skills. When children spend less time on smartphones, they have more opportunities to engage in meaningful conversations, build friendships, and learn empathy. These interactions are the foundation of emotional intelligence, which is crucial for success. Restricting smartphones encourages students to communicate directly with their peers and their teachers, fostering a connected and supportive community. Our school days are meant to be spent focused on learning, both socially and academically. Breaks should be spent playing games like tag, running around, playing football, discussing TV shows, but playgrounds that our children are in have grown quiet. Children are huddled over phones, looking at videos. They are not talking to each other. They are not participating in sport. They are getting physically unhealthy because of their phones. This isn't an issue just in Hampshire. In New Zealand, where I'm originally from, a nationwide ban has been introduced on smartphones in schools. Schools there report very similar results to schools here, where the phones have been banned. Breaks are noticeably a lot noisier. A sense of energy has returned. Sport is being played. Children are chatting. They are yelling. The teachers have to do a little bit more, to be fair, but that is something that had disappeared, that the conversations weren't happening. Smartphones can be a distraction in the classroom. So giving children the freedom to enjoy school without the presence of smartphones allows children to be children. It allows children to develop essential life skills, form meaningful relationships, and achieve their full potential. Childhood lasts a lifetime, so let's let children enjoy their school days just as we did, free from the lure of social media and the smartphone. Let us show leadership on this issue, and please support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Becker. I will now close the debate, but if Councillor Tippett-Cooper would like to sum up or have a right of reply, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, members. Everyone's contribution has been really, really interesting. Clearly, with a combination of knowledge and passion and empathy for the issue. Councillor Becker has said everything extremely eloquently and better than I ever could on this issue. And I emphasise that this is a call on Hampshire County Council to show leadership and clarity in this area. And Councillor Horrell speaks eloquently herself on this issue about how a ban is working in the schools she works with. And indeed, Councillor Brooke highlights how there is a disparity between what schools are doing at the moment, and therefore why it is so important that schools are shown the leadership and clarity on this issue from Hampshire County Council, which is ultimately what this motion is calling on them to do. And Councillor Bolton's comments, his powerful comments about his own children's experience with their smartphones, I think shows how important it is that the school environment is actually a safe haven for children from smartphones and their adverse impacts.
Thank you, Councillor Tippett-Cooper. Right, members, is Councillor Tippett-Cooper's motion agreed? All those in favour?
I'm supposed to vote. Yes.
Right, all those against? All those who wish to abstain? Thank you. I think we can agree that the motion is agreed. Thank you all very much. We will now go on to the evening's second motion, which is also in the agenda, and which has been moved by Councillor Bolton. Councillor Bolton, do you have a seconder for your motion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. It's Councillor Horrell.
Right, thank you. Right, Councillor Bolton, if you would like to introduce your motion. Sorry, Councillor Horrell.
Mr Mayor, I'd like to second the motion but reserve my right to speak.
Oh,
Thank
sorry,
you.
yes, of course.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor and fellow council members, I speak today to propose this motion grounded in our commitment to protecting pensioners in genuine need from the threat of fuel poverty. We all understand that winter can be a harsh season, especially for those struggling to afford essentials like heating. Many of our elderly residents depend on the winter fuel payment to keep warm and safe when temperatures drop. Today, however, we face a situation that risks leaving many of these individuals vulnerable while taking the one-size-fits-all approach that lacks the nuance required to protect those in need without overspending. The recent announcement by the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, to restrict the winter fuel payment only to pensioners who receive means-tested benefits like pension credit raises concerns. While we agree that those with higher incomes should not receive benefits, they should not receive benefits they do not need, we cannot ignore the reality that the current changes may hurt far more than they help. Age UK estimates that 2 million pensioners who would benefit from these funds will no longer receive them. Among these are individuals right here in the Winchester district who now face the impossible choice between heating their homes or affording other essentials. This is a decision no one should be forced to make, least of all our older residents. We agree with the government's intention to ensure that resources are directed where they are most needed, but we must be careful in our approach. The winter fuel payment has served as a critical resource for those on fixed incomes who struggle to keep up with rising energy costs. A more targeted approach to restricting these payments is understandable, but as it stands, this policy risks excluding those on low incomes who sit just above the pension credit threshold and therefore miss out on support. This is not a fair solution. The current means testing approach fails to consider the significant barriers that prevent many pensioners from claiming pension credit in the first place. These include administrative challenges and, unfortunately, a sense of stigma associated with claiming financial aid. Many pensioners eligible for pension credit do not receive it and may now miss out on the winter fuel payment as well. We believe that any attempt to target this benefit must take these realities into account to avoid leaving our vulnerable residents behind. In light of these changes, this council has a duty to act on behalf of pensioners who depend on this allowance to stay warm. Our motion today calls for a local awareness campaign to help for eligible residents access pension credit, which would enable them to qualify for winter fuel payment. We are committed to working with local charities and community organisations to reach those most in need and help them access all the support they are entitled to. Furthermore, this motion asks that the council leader write directly to the Chancellor of the Exchequer to advocate for a fairer, more nuanced approach to winter fuel payments. We are urging the government to review this policy and consider a more precise mechanism for targeting support, one that includes safeguards for pensioners whose income sits just above the eligible threshold for pension credit, but who will struggle with heating costs. By supporting Age UK's Save the Winter Fuel Payments for Struggling Pensioners petition, we are adding our voice to those across the UK who want a compassionate, effective policy for protecting vulnerable pensioners. Our motion encourages each council member to sign the petition in support of a refined approach that carefully considers both financial responsibility and the genuine need of our community members. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Right, debate, please. Right, Councillor Lee, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Bolton, for bringing this important motion before us. I was a citizens' advice advisor for some 7 years, and so I have a slightly different take, so I hope you will bear with me. So this motion rightly highlights some of the risks associated with means testing in winter fuel payment, yet it misses critical elements concerning the broader implications for all age groups facing fuel poverty and financial hardship. Citizens Advice's recent publication, the National Red Index, underscores that the impact of the current cost of living crisis extends beyond pensioners, with millions of households struggling to afford basic necessities, including heating. By solely focusing on pensioners, which of course has many high-risk individuals, the motion overlooks the fact that young families, disabled individuals, and low-income households are also vulnerable to fuel poverty. A more comprehensive approach, I suggest, as recommended by Citizens Advice, would support other at-risk groups facing a similar heat or eat dilemma. Additionally, while the motion advocates for promoting pension credit uptake, it lacks concrete steps to tackle the root causes of lower benefit take-up, such as the complexity and perceived stigma associated with claiming support, as recognised by Councillor Bolton. As the National Red Index suggests, addressing barriers in accessing all benefits, including improved communication strategies and simplifying the application process, as has been mentioned, would ensure more effective support across demographics. Expanding, I believe, the awareness of campaigns to include these measures and considering improved options to provide more emergency fuel support through local schemes would offer a more robust response to fuel poverty that aligns with Citizens Advice's broader findings on the falling living standards across the UK. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Councillor Brooke, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'd like to thank Councillor Bolton for bringing this before us today. I think it's a really important discussion that many of us have had amongst our friends and families recently. At the time of this announcement, it was already known that the cap on the energy costs would be increasing. So to take away that on top of knowing that the bills would increase, I think is a really unfair thing to do to all of the pensioners. There will, of course, always be those who just miss out, who are just above the threshold, but taking a more informed and appropriate approach to income versus outgoings and means testing this in a much fairer and nuanced way would always have been the right way to do this. I understand that the government were looking to save some money, and yet they still missed the opportunity to means test child benefit based on household incomes rather than individual incomes, which would have saved far more than removing the pension credits, removing the fuel allowance from those who were receiving pension credits. In a previous incarnation, I was a social prescriber who was very often supporting elderly patients with social issues. And as Councillor Bolton highlighted, there are those who, for which there is a stigma, will not claim the pension credits to which they're entitled. And focusing on removing this stigma is certainly something this council can help with. Indeed, there were very often people who were in great need of support, and you'd set up the support and somebody would go around and go, oh, I don't need that, because they come from a generation where they got on with things and they carried on keeping on. So I fully support this motion. I think it's a really important and timely discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brooke. Right. Is there anybody who would like to second?
I'm happy to seek and reserve my right to speak.
Right, if we can just have a look at this amendment. Is anybody else who wants to speak on the original debate? I'll take that as a no.
It'll probably just take, members might just wish to read the...
Yes, could we take,
we could take 10 minutes perhaps?
yes, 10 minutes
Yeah.
to read the amendment.
Perhaps we could just
wish to debate the original motion? There was no reply. I would like to call on Councillor Todd to introduce the amendment, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I'd like to thank Councillor Bolton for his motion. It's one I know well. On October the 3rd, I was in this very council chamber when exactly the same motion was proposed by Councillor Curnow-Ford at Hampshire County Council. And after amendment, I was happy to support it. It's an important issue. We have more than 25,000 people receiving the state pension in our district, but only 1,616 receive pension credit. All the evidence is that many more would qualify. But the way this is being introduced and the way that the retention of the winter fuel allowance is being managed means that many of them risk facing real hardship. And as the motion said, and as Councillor Bolton says, being forced to choose between heating and eating. And it is understandably a very popular motion, as well as thanking Councillor Bolton or Councillor Curnow-Ford at Hampshire. I could be thanking Councillor Kingsbury at Welwyn Hatfield Borough Council, Councillor Fothergill at Somerset Council, Councillor Rafiq at Peterborough City Council, Councillor Wildy at Medway Council, Councillor Fletcher at Bolsover District Council, and Councillor Alley at West Sussex County Council. When we were in Hampshire's chamber, Councillor Porter put forward a constructive amendment to it, which was accepted, and I will attempt to do the same. I want to make it locally relevant, but also to reflect the work that we're already doing in this area. The motion as written implies that we haven't started driving awareness of the uptake of pension credit, and we have. We're already doing it, partly as a result of a question asked by Councillor Bolton last month, and so has amendments in to change the language about that. I want to establish the principle that the cost of dealing with the mess left by the last government shouldn't fall on the most vulnerable. Now, several of the motions in other places added a clause attacking their local MPs for voting for the cut to the winter fuel allowance. But we don't need to do that because all three of our local MPs voted against the cut. Paul Holmes, in addition, spoke in the Conservative debate on it, and Dr. Danny Chambers went one better and directly challenged the Chancellor and made exactly the point that is laid out in the original motion, which is why I suggest an amendment recognising that rather than repeating that activity. So rather than attacking our MPs, as has happened with some amendments, or diverting attention for their work, I think the most productive thing we can do is to support them. And the words around the work of our MPs seeks to do that. And again, when we debated the motion at Hampshire, it became clear that there was consensus that some degree of means testing might be needed, but that the crude cliff edge proposed by Labour was not the answer. And I hope we can achieve the same consensus here. And finally, in Hampshire at least, and I'm very pleased that Councillor Lee raised the same point today, there was clear cross-party support that we mustn't just think of the pensioners facing fuel poverty, but also the many, many other non-pensioners. And that's why I'm proposing to add this section at the end. So this amendment does that. To be absolutely clear, the intent and purpose of the motion is absolutely one that we support. We do not support the changes put forward by the Labour government and the way that they have put them forward in particular. I confess to being genuinely surprised that the change that they proposed was so poorly thought through and designed, and that they didn't deal with this cliff edge issue. Genuinely surprised. I thought they would have been on top of it. So this motion acknowledges the original motion, but it goes beyond it, and it also recognises the work that our MPs are doing. It recognises the work that the Council is already doing, and it looks more broadly at the needs of all of those that are choosing between heating and eating. That's why I'm proposing this amendment, and I hope we are all able to support it tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Todd. We can now debate the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate for you letting me speak on this. I think Councillor Todd tried to speak far more reasonably than the wording of the amendment before us. In fact, we just spoke to him in the break to ask if this could be amended, and he laughed at us. This amendment is political point scoring. It's bringing a political football to a really important issue, which Councillor Todd has neglected to just tell us. We have earlier this evening passed unanimously our Code of Conduct, which is about acting with integrity, leading by example, and in a way which inspires public confidence. That's been breached with this amendment. The disingenuous nature of this amendment by using its political point score, when Councillor Todd has just stood up and said it supports our MPs. No, it doesn't. It supports the Lib Dem MP only. This amendment and the reaction when we asked if we could discuss it being brought this evening with no discussion about such an important point is horrific. And there's a saying, I'm not angry, I'm just disappointed. I'm not disappointed, I'm absolutely disgusted.
Thank you, Councillor Brooke. Councillor Horrell, please.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. And following on from a very genuinely constructive debate around the whole issue of smartphones, we rather hope that something as important as the winter fuel payment would actually be a reasonable discussion this evening, and we could all share our thoughts on that. And in fact, if there'd been a genuine concern about this as an issue, why did the leader not come to Councillor Bolton in the last week and say, we have some suggestions to make, would you accept them? No dialogue, we just have the paper presented to us this evening and we have to take a break. That isn't a genuinely constructive way to approach this. What is the message to our residents this evening? We're here saying that we're concerned about the 25,000 pensioners and how many of them will be impacted. And I hope that we as local representatives genuinely believe that. But then when you have the chance to actually do something constructive, it's turned into a political football. Not Councillor Brooke, but nonetheless, you can now hear this. So, what is it? What is this message that we're giving to residents tonight? It isn't one of genuine concern. And I know that the council have started this week coffee mornings to make people aware of the actions they can take on pension credit. And I support that. I endorse it. I think that's a really good move. But I think, as we've found as district councillors, we can do more than that because we are in touch with our residents and we can actually improve that activity over and above the choices that have been made to date. So I don't disagree with what we've done so far, but we think we could do more, which is why the motion refers to that. So, councillors, it's on your head this evening. If you want to make it a political football, please do. But we're not going to actually walk away from this genuine point, and we hope that residents listening to this tonight and the communication that will come out afterwards will recognise the approach that's been taken and how unsavoury it actually is. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Brooke. Could I call on Councillor Lerney, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I welcome the amendments to this motion proposed by the leader and want to speak particularly on the final lines that have been added. It is important that we look at the facts around hardship. While many pensioners above the qualifying level for pension credit will struggle and absolutely should be protected from the removal of the winter fuel allowance, many pensioners are very well off indeed. The Liberal Democrat triple lock policy has helped protect pensioners from increasing prices. Last year, the Institute for Fiscal Studies reported that the state pension had risen by 60% in cash terms between 2010 and 2023, compared with prices rising by 42% and earnings rising by only 40%. This year, the state pension rose by another 6.7% and will go up by a further 4.1% next year. In comparison, in 2010-11, the child allowance was £33.70 per week for 2 children, and this year is £42.55, an increase of just 26% over 13 years, and far less than inflation. Next year, that will rise by just 1.7%. Age UK estimates that 1.9 million, 16% of pensioners in the UK live in relative poverty. In contrast, the Child Poverty Action Group reports that 4.3 million, and that's 30% of this nation's children, were living in poverty in 2022-23, up from 3.6 million in 2010-11. Over 2/3 of those children living in poverty live in working families, and that is an absolute disgrace. We should not be defining need by age. We all have families, and indeed single people below pension age, living in our wards who desperately need help with their bills, and I would urge members to support the broadened range of the amended motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lerney. Councillor Bolton, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I've only been doing this, as in politics, for a couple of years, as you all know. And so I'm quite likely politically very naive compared to most of you. And I'm now sad, as it happens, because I just witnessed a very smug grin on your face whilst you told us that you wouldn't accept any further amendments to this. I hoped we all agree substantially on what we're trying to say here. And I'm sad that we're having this debate now and that we've got amendments that you know we clearly are not going to accept because some of them are factually incorrect and have been disputed by the very bodies that they are claimed to have come from. I thought there might be some amendments, but I hoped that we would be able to speak as one voice, that what the Labour government have done and what Rachel Reeves has done has been to take a very large hammer to crack the nut and has made a miscalculation on the impact of their decision over winter fuel payments. And it leaves me sad that we as a chamber and as a body of people can't pull together around language that we all agree on. Because we all, and I agree that some of the other measures that need to be brought in place, but this was just dealing with one specific issue that has come up just recently. And I was hopeful that we would all unite and come up with a form of words that we could say as one resounding chamber that this is just wrong. And you need to think carefully over the implications of making snap decisions. Now, some of what I've just said, we have all said. And I feel that we've got to get beyond this political footballing and come up with something that we all agree on. so that we can send a message to Rachel Reeves and the Labour government that this is an unacceptable approach to take. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. And I think there's Councillor Morris. Sorry, Councillor Williams, I beg your pardon.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll keep my comments brief. I welcome this amendment, and especially the mention of the recognition of the hard work that's done by our officers already in offering the drop-in sessions, especially the one in Bishop's Waltham just yesterday. I've had many people stop me in the high street already over the last weekend to thank the council for putting on these sessions for awareness. I also welcome the amendment to recognise the cross-party support by both our two Conservative MPs and our Liberal Democrat MP in support of this motion. Cross-party consensus against the Labour Party's short-sighted decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Tippett-Cooper, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just add to the discussion. I mean, the comments from the Conservative group are very clearly very passionate about this issue. But I think the reality is that this council, the majority of this council, does believe that the last government's mismanagement of the economy and public services has resulted in this £22 billion gap. And that's a brutal reality, but we do believe that. But the fact of the matter is the substance of the motion is still there. The resolutions are still there. The beliefs may be different on this side of the House, and I expect with the Green members as well. And I suspect even some of you probably have found the decisions made by your previous government unpalatable and difficult to have agreed with yourselves. But that is our beliefs, as the motion says. But we're still resolving to all have that united voice as to what the council resolves to do.
Thank you, Councillor Tippett-Cooper. Councillor Langford-Smith, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I very much welcome the adoption of the Code of Conduct earlier this evening, and may I draw members' attention to the general principles which read, "In undertaking my role, I impartially exercise my responsibilities in the interests of the local community." And may I respectfully ask members if the inclusion of the amendment detailed at 2 remains, which I'm sure we can all see is clearly a political point, are we actually being impartial and acting in the best interest of the public that we serve? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Langford-Smith. Is there anybody else who wishes to take part in the debate? In that case, Councillor Becker, please.
Thank you. I have to admit, I was somewhat surprised to see the original version of this motion, which seemed to infer that we weren't doing anything in this area, given that I had given Councillor Bolton an extremely detailed answer at the last full council meeting, where I outlined the support that this council was giving to those who may be impacted by the withdrawal of the universal winter fuel payment and by the cost of living crisis more generally. During that answer, I confirmed the ongoing support we give to citizens' advice. I outlined the support provided directly by the council. I said that for tenants in sheltered housing, officers already carry out benefit checks with all new tenants to ensure that they are receiving the benefits that they're eligible for. For other tenants throughout September and October, I said that officers will be contacting tenants of pensionable age to promote the uptake of pension credit. And where we find tenants who are not eligible but struggling with fuel bills, we will be supporting them to access free fuel vouchers from the Housing Association. Officers have carried out those checks, and I've checked again today, and they've confirmed that 16 households have used those fuel vouchers to date. As I'm sure you're all aware, and as Councillor Horrell has spoken about, we've started rolling out the pension credit coffee mornings already. The lovely Toby and Davina were in Denmead today. They'll be at King Harold Court tomorrow, and there are further sessions planned across the district in the coming weeks. In respect of raising the issue with Parliament, not only did the MP for Winchester raise the issue with the Chancellor of the Exchequer on the 2nd of September, he again raised the issue today at a debate in Westminster Hall. The amendment clearly thanks all 3 of our district MPs for their votes against the change. The wording of motions matters. It matters because these are the things that we are committing ourselves to. So they have to be as accurate as possible and reflect the current situation. They need to reflect the reality faced by our residents and that the choice between heating and eating is not one limited by pension or not pensionable age, but it's one felt keenly by all of our vulnerable families. The changes proposed by the amendment bring the motion up to date. They ensure that the keenly important issue of heating affects people of all ages and recognises that fact. So I'm happy to second these amendments. And I hope you do too.
Thank you, Councillor Becker. Now, I think if I've got the process correct, I can call on Neil Bolton to sum up.
I've nothing at all to say to any of you. I'm disgusted.
Right. Can we now vote on the amendment, please? All those in favour of the amendment, please. All those against the amendment, please. Are there any abstentions? I think in that case the amendment is carried. And now we go to a vote on the original motion.
On a point of order, can I ask for a recorded vote, Mr. Mayor?
Can we have a recorded vote, please? Right.
Mr. Mayor, please
Yes.
may we assist? In order for there to be a recorded vote, we need 5 members of the chamber to indicate that is the wish of the chamber, please. Thank you. I think that's carried forward. So if you give us a moment, Mr. Mayor, we'll set that up. But if we can just assist, Mr. Mayor, the matter that is before the chamber this evening is now the new substantive motion, which is the one that is passed and is in your table, which includes the red text. So you're voting on that motion now this evening, members. David, perhaps if you just remind members how we do this.
Members, shortly the information will appear on your consoles. Just bear with us. It hasn't appeared just yet. When we're ready to vote, please... just bear with us. Thank you, members. Has everybody cast their vote? It's the previous screen as well. So, Mr. Mayor, the results are as presented on the screen. The motion as amended was carried.
Right, I think we have voted on the original motion as amended, and this has been carried. So it's now agreed. We go on to, where are we now? Agenda item 9 is questions from members of the council. Members who've submitted questions will be invited in turn to either read out their question or refer to this as set out. Sorry, my apologies. Members, the next item of business this evening is the agenda item 8, changes to committee membership. Mr. John.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've not been notified of any changes to committees. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, we'll go on to agenda item 9, questions from members of the council. Members who've submitted questions will be invited in turn to either read out their questions or to refer to this as set out, which will be in the order that they are published on the council's website. A reminder also that our procedure is that only the questioner can ask one supplementary question and should indicate accordingly. Members are reminded that our procedure rules allows that the total time occupied by questions and the answer and the supplementary shall not exceed 40 minutes. Members, I shall invite you to ask your question in turn and for the Cabinet member to respond. Can I ask that any supplementary questions are succinct and to the point? And as a reminder, the written answers will be published to the questions submitted on the website. Now, question 1. Councillor Horrell, question 1, please.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. How many empty homes does the council have in total in the district, and how many by ward? Thank you.
Deputy Leader Neil Cutler, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the question. Councillor Horrell, I'm assuming you're meaning total homes rather than council-owned homes. So the figures provided by the Revenue and Benefits team show that in October this year there were 1,043 homes registered as empty. Of these, 815, which is 78% of them, have been empty for less than 1 year. 112, that's 10.7% between 1 and 2 years. 90, that's 8.5%, between 2 and 5 years. No, so between, yes, sorry. Where have we got to? Yeah. 1 and 2 years, 112, 90 between 2 and 5 years, which is 8.6%, 20 between 5 and 10 years, and 3 10 to 20 years, and 3 over 20 years. Thus, the total empty for more than 1 year is 228. There are 58,651 homes in the district. Therefore, the empty homes for less than 1 year represent 1.39% of the total, and for more than 1 year, 0.39%. The less than 1 year figure is always at its peak in October, as many students have yet to register. Annually, the figure always declines to reach a low point in April before rising again as students complete their courses and leave their accommodation. In the Winchester town, the total empty is 433, which is 41% of the district total, of which 335 have been, which is 77%, have been empty for less than a year, and 98 for more than 1 year. The detailed figures are for parish rather than by ward, which amounts to a very substantial spreadsheet. So I'm quite happy to, rather than read out all the detail now, to publish that with the answer. But across the parishes, there were 610 empty homes, of which 480 are less than 1 year. The figures a little bit distorted by the MDAs. For example, Whiteley has 100 empty homes. 96% of them are less than 1 year. So they include the new homes in North Whiteley. And similarly in Newlands, there are 21 empty ones. 100% of them are less than 1 year. So I hope that answers your question. And as I say, I can't give you the ward breakdown, but we'll publish the parish breakdown with the answer.
Councillor Horrell, do you have a supplementary?
I do, Mr Mayor, thank you. And can I thank Councillor Cutler for that very detailed analysis. And I think all of us would be grateful to receive that if that could be published for all councillors. But we know that the Labour government is actually focusing on housing and the imposition of a top-down target to us of potentially 4,800 additional homes in the district. They have also announced that they want to bring empty homes back into use as part of that drive for homes. Would the Cabinet member agree that this council should do all in its power to bring the empty homes that are certainly over 1 year back into use, using potential CPO powers or all other means to actually bring that stock into use so that we can add that to our housing availability for the district rather than having to always build new? I know historically that number was about 500, so it has crept up, but there is clearly a breadth across the years, as you've indicated today. But I would be very keen to understand whether you think as a council that the Cabinet should bring plans to us about bringing some of those back into use to ensure that we are making best use of the housing stock in the district. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Horrell. I think there are some opportunities to explore. I can't give a complete undertaking that we will implement measures, but I think we need to explore what those 228 more than 1 year houses, what the makeup is. I mean, some of that, I think the 1 to 2 year, which is another big chunk, may possibly include those where probate has been a problem, and it takes a long time for probate to come through. So it probably is better to work back from the very long-term ones and have a look at it. Last year we did implement the increase in the premium on council tax for empty homes to the maximum, so that it's 100% after 1 year. And I think that may have some effect on the figures. I think it would be worthwhile going back to explore the changes over time. But as I say, it fluctuates during the year as well, which makes it a little bit more difficult to judge. But yes, I'm happy to explore what might be able to be done there, but I can't make any commitment that we can add to our current policy. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cutler. Question 2 from Councillor Chamberlain, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and my question is for the Cabinet Member for Climate Emergency. In early October 2024, Winchester City Council and their waste partner BIFA implemented a significant revision to the waste and recycling collection routes. Please can the Cabinet Member update us on how the implementation of the new routes across the district has gone from the Council's perspective and whether there's been any significant feedback from our residents?
Thank you, Councillor Chamberlain. The objectives of the new routes were to simplify the round structure, to balance the rounds so that a similar number of properties are collected each day, to reduce mileage and carbon emissions of the collection trucks, to allow for future housing growth, and to allow the introduction of food waste collection to be carried out smoothly. All of the properties across Winchester are now operating on the new schedules, and despite the inevitable few hiccups, the change has gone remarkably smoothly with very few complaints from residents. Issues have been thrown up by very new housing areas not on the system, houses which don't have letterboxes, and a few homes with collections requiring local knowledge, but these are being worked through and put us in a good position to deliver the new food waste service, which all properties need to get by April 2026. The revised format hard copy posted calendars have been well received, and the online collection day pages have been simplified and now enable calendar downloads into a personal calendar. We have also now started emailing bin day notifications to those that have signed up to the QR code on the posted calendar. We are seeing the benefits of more efficient rounds with fewer miles travelled and less time taken to deliver the service, building in more resilience to our collections. I have thanked our team and contractor Biffa privately for their part in helping all this happen, but I would like to take this opportunity to thank Biffa and our own team in public for a job very well done.
Councillor Chamberlain, do you have a supplementary?
I do, Mr Mayor, and I thank the Cabinet Member for a detailed response. My supplementary is simply that in the communications regarding the new routes, there is often mention of a new fully electric waste and recycling vehicle, and I was just wondering whether the Cabinet Member can update us on the deployment of that vehicle.
Thank you. The electric truck has arrived and is sitting in the depot looking very smart. Unfortunately, we're still waiting for the charger to arrive in typical fashion. As you can imagine, a large food waste truck has a battery which we can't plug into a local commercial charger. We anticipate that arriving this week and hope to deploy that lorry very soon. We will be looking at using it across the district to test out how rounds do with an electric vehicle. So hopefully you'll see it along your local roads before very long.
Thank you, Councillor Lerney. Question number 3 is from Councillor Godfrey, please.
Mr Mayor, Councillor Godfrey offers his apologies. We have a significant issue at Mitchell Devon Parish Council this evening, which is meeting at the same time. So we've split ourselves. Some are here and some have had to attend. So he's unable to ask his question directly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Question 4, Councillor Tippett-Cooper, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Despite some local authorities being forced to close public toilets, Winchester City Council last year announced a programme of works to refurbish a number of the district's public toilets. How are these works progressing? The question to the Cabinet Member for the Climate Emergency. Or not?
Thank you very much for your question, Councillor Tippett-Cooper. I'm now the Cabinet Member responsible for our toilet refurbishment programme, so I'm going to be answering. I'm really delighted to report that our programme of refurbishment of our public toilets across the district is really progressing well. Works completed so far include the toilets at Alresford, the Chesil multi-storey car park, and of course the really heavily used toilets in Market Lane. And we were just astonished as a cabinet when we learnt the usage at Market Lane. Actually, it was quite astonishing. Anyway, those have now been refurbished. Work is now progressing and underway on the main park and ride toilets. After Christmas, we will start work on the other toilets in the city, in Abbey Gardens, that also has huge usage on a daily basis. They will close in the new year to allow major refurbishment to take place, and they are expected to reopen in March 2025. We will also begin work on Bishop's Waltham, as well as engaging with other town and parish councils to see how best we can deliver toilet provision across the district going forward. It is worth pointing out that in 2023, despite pressure on our resources, this administration put in place additional cleaning as well as introducing this full refurbishment programme. We certainly don't underestimate the importance of keeping our public toilets clean and in a good state of repair. It is beneficial not only for our residents, but also our visitor economy, and contributes to enhancing our reputation across our district as a great place to visit.
Thank you. Do you have a supplementary?
None, but thank you, Councillor Thompson.
Councillor Bolton, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Excuse me, I've just hit the wrong button. When canvassing in Bishop's Waltham recently, one of the matters that came up was the bin stores in Houchin Street, Bassingwell car park. The parish council and town team carried out surveys that showed that the commercial bins left on the roads were unsightly and spoilt the approaches to the high street. I understand that the City Council agreed to install bin stores in both the Lower Lane car park and Houchin Street car park. This project was also backed by the Chamber of Trade. The Lower Lane store was built with wooden fencing that hid the bins as required. The Houchin Street store was built with low metal fencing that was not going to stop the bins being seen. As a result of this, traders have not used it. I also understand that HCC wants the commercial bins removed from Houchin Street as they want to create a pedestrian area. Can you please give a date when the correct fencing will be installed, and if possible, what steps will be taken by the council to persuade traders that they must either keep the bins in on their own property or use the bin stores? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Thank you, Councillor Bolton. The objective of the provision of the bin stalls was not to hide bins from view, but to enable bins to be removed from the highway, creating a more attractive environment in the centre of Bishop's Waltham and making the area safer for all highway users, particularly the disabled. Both bin stalls are complete and are available for use. The Lower Lane car park store is being well used, but use has not taken off for the Basinwell car park adjacent to Houchin Street in the same way, and commercial waste bins are still being permanently left on the highway. Many of the businesses will need additional bins from April 2025 when the Environment Act requirement on the recycling of commercial waste and food waste from business comes in, and the obstruction to the highway has the potential to get significantly worse. Our service lead for engineering, transport and special maintenance recently spent the day in Bishop's Waltham alongside local ward councillor Jonathan Williams, and I'd like to take the opportunity to congratulate him on his recent victory in the county council by-election. They met the interested parties from the local community to explain the reasoning behind the location of the bin store and the need to clear the highway, and this was very well received. The City Council cannot make the owners move their bins. However, anything stored on the highway constitutes an obstruction under the Highways Act, which the County Council are able to enforce. Owners are also risking compensation claims in the event of an accident. Changes to the Basinwell bin store will be considered when traders use it.
Right, Councillor Bolton, the supplementary.
I might as well, just for fun. I wonder, you say that there was no intention to hide the bins. Might be a good idea. Nobody wants to look at them. Just thought I'd suggest it.
Thank you. We have looked at providing wooden shutters around the bin store. However, we're reluctant to spend any more money on something which was asked for by the local community, but which isn't being used. As I say, once the traders do start using the store, then in the light of experience, we'll look at whether that's the correct thing to do, or whether more will be needed to ensure that the bin store operates effectively.
Thank you, Councillor Lerney. Councillor Lee, please. Question 5, 6.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Global temperatures are on course, as I'm sure you're aware, to a dangerous 3 degrees C rise, and with 6 out of our 9 planetary boundaries already breached, and the remaining 2 are about to be breached. This is going to be compromising our planet's resilience and accelerating biodiversity loss. This highlights the urgent need for integrated adaptation and resilience strategies that support climate mitigation. The focus on resilience and adaptation will be pivotal at this year's COP29 climate and COP2016 biodiversity conferences, and they're happening as we speak. Despite the UK's National Adaptation Programme, the government's resilience plans are insufficient for a 2-degree rise, let alone a 4-degree rise. Local authorities can play a key role in preparing communities and ecosystems for these climate impacts. This is underscored by the Local Government Association, who emphasise the need for councils to coordinate local adaptation and resilient needs and opportunities. And additionally, the Climate Change Committee's independent assessment of UK climate risk identified 60 risks and opportunities relevant to councils, reinforcing the need for integrated strategies. So does this council agree there is now a need for a council adaptation and resilience strategy, one that is set aside, building on our climate and nature emergency plans to proactively manage climate risks and stay ahead of the climate risk curves? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Given the international failure to tackle the climate crisis, we will of necessity be incorporating adaptation and resilience into our new council plan currently in development. The leader explicitly addressed this point during council plan consultation at the scrutiny in both the policy committees. Our Regulation 19 proposed submission local plan already includes planning for adaptation as well as mitigation as necessary for new developments, as recommended by the Local Government Association. The actions needed for effective adaptation, however, involve more than just this council. A local strategy will still need to involve commitments from the County Council, National Park Authority, utility companies, the Environment Agency and many others. A joined-up approach is needed and central government guidance is needed to clarify roles and responsibilities. While continuing to take actions as a council ourselves where practicable, we will be considering how we can best lobby government for not only guidance but increased resource to fund adaptation and resilience measures.
Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Lee?
Yes, I did. Thank you. The vulnerabilities can too often be hidden or managed or tolerated in a way that masks its effects. And I understand what you've said, but to safeguard our resources and communities, it is crucial that we refine our approach, and it sounds like we are intending to do that, and ensure that our due diligence in climate and nature is considered in all our strategies, policies, and not just for mitigation. So can I ask, will we have a plan, a timetable of some sort to look at new objectives which fall out of the council plan with risks and KPIs? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. I think exactly the action we will take and what we propose to do going forward will be part of that that new council plan development process. I'm reluctant to give specific commitments now until we look at exactly what's in that council plan and the resource we have available to back it up.
Thank you, Councillor Lurney. Councillor Warwick, question 7, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and apologies for being a bit of a stuck record on this. I just wondered if there's any update on the naming or commemorating World Cup hero Terry Payne at the newly opened King George V Pavilion. Thank you.
Councillor Becker.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Warwick, for the question again. As you know, the KGV Pavilion opened in the summer and it is proving to be a great success. Since the project began, and as referred to in your question, the pavilion had become to be known as the King George V Pavilion. In my last answer to you, I did say that we'd be raising the issue with the KGV steering group, which includes the football and cricket clubs that use the site, as well as representatives of the local community. And we did raise it with that group, and while they are very supportive of naming the beautiful function room after Mr. Payne, they preferred to have the pavilion itself referred to as the KGV Pavilion in order to avoid any confusion for players and visitors, so that's what we've done. However, despite the best efforts of our officers, we have no contact details for Mr. Payne, and to date it's not been possible to contact him, so we haven't been able to proceed with the naming suggestion for the function room. So if you have any contact details for him, that would be fantastic, so we can raise the suggestion with him.
Thank you. A supplementary?
Please, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Officers wrote to me back in March asking for contact details, and I put them in touch, but I never heard anything again. So not only did I not hear back from officers, and I could follow that up if necessary, but I've not heard from you either that you intended to name a room after him, and it would be nice to know how that's going to proceed and whether you would invite him and whether I'd be included. So I think actually since March I've heard nothing, which is why I've had to ask again.
My apologies for that. I didn't realise that officers hadn't gotten back to you when you had provided details, so all I can do is apologise for that. I will ask them what happened with that. As Mr. Payne is still alive, we can't name something after him unless he gives his permission, so we do need to talk to him. So we are very keen to have that conversation. So if you want to provide me those details, then I'm more than willing to write to him myself.
Thank you. Right, Councillor White, please, question 8.
Besides the work to increase recycling rates, what is the Council doing to encourage a circular economy in terms of reducing consumption and supporting reuse and repair?
Thank you, Councillor White. To reduce the amount of waste going to incineration, our number one priority is introducing food waste collection. No other initiative is likely to have anything close to the same impact in reducing waste. The introduction of the new service will be accompanied by a communications campaign, not just encouraging recycling, but also reduction of food waste. Experience elsewhere has shown that this service highlights to households the amount of food they are wasting and does lead to them buying less. In addition to the items collected in the green recycling bin, we offer the recycling of batteries and small electricals at the curbside and provide clothes banks, which in 2023-24 collected over 200 tonnes of clothes for reuse and recycling from around the district. We have supported local initiatives such as repair cafes and welcome further grant applications for similar schemes. The amount of residual waste is a key performance indicator for both this council as the collection authority and Hampshire County Council as the disposal authority. And as part of Project Integra, we are working with authorities across Hampshire on campaigns to encourage waste reduction and reuse.
Thank you. Do you have a supplementary?
Just quickly, so is the idea of circular economy, is that going to be part of the council plan?
I'm not sure that's come through as a proposal for inclusion. Clearly, the circular economy is something that is part of our overall waste strategy. But we will have a look about whether we specifically include mention of that, but it is implicit in the work that we're doing.
Thank you, Councillor Lurney. Question 9, Councillor Brooke, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The administration has placed a lot of emphasis on the need for more social housing within the district and increasing the Winchester City Council housing stock. With discussions at a recent scrutiny meeting regarding this and the use of temporary housing, I wondered how many children we have currently housed in temporary accommodation.
Councillor Westwood, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Brooke, for what is a very important question, actually. The Council is committed to both preventing and relieving homelessness, ensuring that everyone in the district receives housing advice and appropriate support if they're homeless or at risk of homelessness. In the last financial year, the Council has experienced a 122% increase in approaches from households who were homeless or at risk of homelessness, thereby intensifying the pressure on the availability of accommodation and staffing resource. We're fortunate to be in a position where our use of bed and breakfast is very low, and we make good use of our own housing stock to manage this demand. Despite the rising demand, the Council has maintained top quartile performance in preventing homelessness, with the use of emergency accommodation remaining within budget. In recognition of this rising demand, at my Cabinet Committee housing meeting yesterday, I agreed new measures not only to expand accommodation options, but also to ensure adequate staffing and resources to effectively manage homeless households. As of Monday, the 4th of November, the temporary accommodation figures were as follows. There were 74 households were in temporary accommodation, of which 35 were households with children. 21 of those households were in self-contained accommodation. In total, 76 children were in temporary accommodation, of which 52 were in self-contained accommodation. The Council does not have any children currently in bed and breakfast accommodation.
Thank you. Supplementary question?
Yes, I do, Mr Mayor, thank you. And thank you for your response. There was a whole discussion earlier about the mental health of our young people in our communities, and not having a house over your head that you know will be there tomorrow, next week, is certainly going to take way more of a toll than any smartphone might. The Office for National Statistics has released figures showing the proportion of tenants' income spent on rent in each local authority area, and paying more than 30% or more of your income is considered unaffordable. The data that was covered for this data was the year to April 2023. Winchester comes in above halfway at 32.8% of income spent on rent. How can Winchester City Council help with this, as I suspect many of those in temporary accommodation is as a result of this unacceptable and unaffordable rents? What action are we currently using to support the reduction in this, and how can we help going forwards?
Thank you. Can I just ask clarification of whether that directly follows the previous answer about how many children in temporary accommodation? I'm asking for advice. Mr Mayor?
Well, it's not very directly part of it. I think we might pass on that particular one. Question 10, Councillor Langford-Smith.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The residents at Newlands have been waiting a very long time for appropriate facilities. Can the administration please provide a firm date that the build of the doctor's surgery will commence, and detail what this administration has done to support the progress of this?
Councillor Porter.
Thank you. Thank you for your question, Councillor Langford-Smith. This council knows that for the well-being of our residents, we expect and work towards local and accessible primary care and GP services. We regard it as a priority in our discussions around building communities right across the district. Healthcare provision is in the plan for West of Waterlooville and has been discussed at the West of Waterlooville Forum. As you know, every facility is linked to a trigger, and in this case, the trigger is 1,500 homes. 1,200 homes are completed, so the next reserve matter application includes the healthcare centre, which will be subject to pre-application discussions and with local engagement in the coming months. My fellow Cabinet member, Councillor Cutler, chairs the West of Waterlooville Forum. The developer is engaging with the expected healthcare provider, and Councillor Cutler has been in active conversation with Granger and the chairman of Newlands Parish Council to progress this. And I know that other district councillors have done too.
Right, a supplementary question?
No supplementary, thank you.
Question 11, Councillor Lee, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have Winchester City Council and the South Downs National Park providing two distinct complementary planning enforcement approaches in my Central Meon Valley ward. 70% of the Central Meon Valley ward falls within the South Downs National Park for planning and enforcement. On October the 29th, there were 73 active enforcement cases in Central Meon Valley, with 43% within the South Downs and 41 concentrated in one single parish, Soberton. Several cases have been unresolved for up to 8 years. The high volume of unauthorised developments, often involving land use changes, leads to environmental damage, community stress, and increased burden for our planning staff. If these high volume of cases are not addressed, we are putting both ourselves at this council and the South Downs National Park at reputational risk and leaving the impacts on communities unresolved. Urgent solutions are needed, potentially including enhanced monitoring, prioritisation, community engagement, ecological sensitive enforcement, and possibly exploring enforcement undertaking similar to the Environment Agency as an alternative to prosecution. So can the council, perhaps in collaboration with the LGA or whoever, lobby for increased powers, resources to help prevent and reduce the high number of enforcement cases? Additionally, can we prioritise the reduction of Central Meon Valley's enforcement case high numbers in Soberton as a matter of urgency? Thank you.
Councillor Porter.
Thank you. Thank you for your question, Councillor Lee. National legislation sets out the approach to enforcement action, and we have provided training to councillors as well, provided by our planning KC on the law surrounding this area of planning. This includes case law, and Winchester City Council has influenced it by some of the cases we have taken to full enforcement. We refer to that same esteemed council, Councillor Andrew Fraser-Urquhart, KC, for specific cases as necessary, and continue to do that wherever necessary. Many of these cases require action from the Environment Agency too. Our officers work with the Environment Agency officers and the County Council enforcement team. That takes some coordination. I do urge councillors to report all incidents where they think environmental crime has taken place to the EA's hotline, 0800 80 70 60. It's a 24-hour service. Like Winchester City Council and the SDMP, the Environment Agency has its own enforcement policy, which is very similar to ours, which is prioritising on the scale of harm to the environment and to people, the duration of that deviation from policy, and a number of occurrences. It's encouraging to see, though, that the EA's 24-25 business plan, set out from April 2024, specifically referring to finding their voice as a confident regulator, which responds to the concerns of communities affected not only by poor water quality, but also by poor waste management and waste crime. And I do hope to pursue that further with the EA. At Winchester City Council, officers treat each ward fairly, providing up-to-date information regularly on new cases, existing cases, and any outcomes of enforcement actions, with named officers listed if you have a particular query. The officers have invited ward members to contact them with any new information they may have and for updates. The team invites ward members as well to confirm which cases they believe are the most significant in their wards. Enforcement action takes a long time and often ends up at appeal. Many breaches are minor and do not warrant enforcement action. Winchester City Council has to strike the right balance with those resources available.
Councillor Lee, do you have a supplementary?
Yeah, very quick one, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Porter. That was a very thorough reply. Thank you. So would the council be open to developing a specific action plan for Surbiton, including enhanced community engagement and monitoring and working with the district councillors?
Thank you, and I know that at every meeting someone is trying to get me to take on the enforcement, a particular area. We do try and make sure that the ones that we can deal with quickly, we deal with. We are also working on every single case all the time to make sure that every single inch forward is a movement forward on that enforcement. So as I said earlier, I can't really discuss particular cases at full council, though I realise you're talking about one particular parish council here. As I said earlier, Winchester works on every case of enforcement, providing up-to-date information regularly and with named officers listed. So if you have a particular query, you can contact them on any case, including any new information you have, and you can discuss which ones you think are important for your parishes. But there are new cases added to enforcement every day, as you know. It takes a minute to record a case and many months, perhaps years, to proceed to a planning application, to an inspector, to a court or an appeal. So the team does invite ward members to confirm which cases they believe are the most significant to their wards, and I really urge you to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. That's the last of the questions, so I think that concludes the business for this evening. I would thank all the members for their time and the officers. And can we now stop the broadcast, please?